The Arizona sun was setting behind the mountains, painting Tombstone's dusty streets in shades of amber and crimson. Samuel Sam Mitchell rode slowly through the nearly empty town, his weathered face reflecting years of solitude on the range. At 43, Sam had earned his reputation as the lonely cowman, a skilled rancher who preferred the company of cattle to people, haunted by memories of a family lost to fever years ago. His horse, Thunder, suddenly stumbled, and Sam dismounted to inspect the damage. The left front shoe had come loose, barely hanging on. With most businesses closed for the evening, Sam knew his only option was Marcus Blackwood's smithy. The burly blacksmith was known for his skill with metal, but also for his harsh temperament and mysterious past. "Hi, how are you? Sorry to interrupt your story, but what I'm going to ask you is really quick, and it will really help the channel to grow and create new stories. Just click below the video image to subscribe. You'll be doing an act of kindness and encouragement to those who are just starting out. Thank you very much, and continue with your story now and have a great day." "Blackwood," Sam called out, approaching the dimly lit forge. "You still working? Got a horse needs attention." Marcus emerged from the shadows, wiping his massive hands on a leather apron. At 55, he was built like an ox, with arms like tree trunks and eyes that seemed to hold secrets. "Mitchell, thought you preferred staying out on that ranch of yours?" "Horse don't care about my preferences," Sam replied, leading Thunder toward the anvil. "Shoes coming loose. Need it fixed before I head back." As Marcus examined the hoof, Sam's attention was drawn to a faint sound from the back of the shop, a soft whimpering, almost like an injured animal. His eyes adjusted to the darkness, and what he saw made his blood run cold. In the far corner, partially hidden behind stacks of iron and tools, sat a small figure, a boy, no more than 10 years old, with hollow cheeks and clothes that hung like rags on his thin frame. But what made Sam's heart stop was the heavy iron shackle around the child's ankle connected to a chain bolted to the wall. "What in God's name?" Sam whispered, taking a step toward the boy. "Stay where you are, Mitchell," Marcus growled, positioning himself between Sam and the child. "That's none of your concern." The boy looked up with eyes that held too much pain for someone so young. His face was streaked with tears, and Sam could see bruises on his arms. "Please, mister," the child whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm so hungry." Sam's jaw clenched. "Boy, what's your name?" "Timothy, sir. Timothy Walsh." "How long you been here, Timothy?" Marcus slammed his hammer on the anvil. "I said it's none of your business. The boy's been acting up, needed some discipline. He's learning respect." "Discipline?" Sam's voice rose. "That child is chained like an animal." "What kind of man?" "The kind who paid good money for him," Marcus interrupted, his eyes flashing dangerously. "Dollar bought him fair and square from a drifter passing through. Boy's got no family, no one to claim him. He works for his keep." Sam felt his world tilt. "You bought him?" "His mama died of the fever up north. Never knew his daddy. Drifter said he couldn't care for him, needed the money for supplies. It's business, Mitchell. Boy's strong, good with the bellows, earns his place." Timothy's quiet sobs filled the silence. Sam knelt down, ignoring Marcus's warning growl. "Timothy, son, where you from originally?" "Phoenix, sir. Mama used to work at the hotel there. She got sick real bad, and after she died, this man said he'd take care of me. But then he brought me here and sold you like livestock," Sam finished, his voice deadly quiet. Marcus stepped forward. "Now you listen here, Mitchell. This is how things work. Boy had nowhere to go, no prospects. I gave him purpose, shelter, food when he earns it. Better than dying on the streets." Sam stood slowly, his hand instinctively moving to the Colt at his hip. "You call this shelter? This child is skin and bones, Marcus. When's the last time he had a proper meal? He ate yesterday." "Would have eaten today if he hadn't been lazy with the fire." "Yesterday?" Sam's voice was incredulous. "You're starving a child." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Marcus's hand moved to a heavy iron rod near the forge. "You best mind your own business, cowman. This town's got its ways, and they ain't changing because you got a soft heart." "What ways?" Since when does Tombstone traffic in children? Marcus laughed bitterly. You've been living in that ranch bubble too long, Mitchell. Half the saloon girls came here the same way. Some of the workers, too. It's survival, pure and simple. Sam's mind reeled. He'd heard whispers, rumors he'd dismissed as gossip. But seeing Timothy chained and starving made everything real. This is wrong, Marcus. Dead wrong. Wrong? Marcus's voice rose. I'll tell you what's wrong. A man thinking he can waltz in here and tell others how to live. That boy's mine now, legal and proper. And unless you got business here, I suggest you take your horse and get out. Sam looked at Timothy again. The boy's eyes held a desperate hope, as if Sam might be his salvation. But what could he do? Marcus was right about one thing. In the eyes of the law, he owned the boy. Fix my horse, Sam said quietly. But this conversation ain't over. As Marcus worked on Thunder's shoe, Sam's mind raced. He'd seen injustice before, but nothing like this. A child, sold like property, chained and starved. The image of Timothy's tear-streaked face would haunt him. There, Marcus said, finishing the repair. That'll be $2. Sam paid without argument. But as he mounted Thunder, he turned back. Timothy, you hold on, son, you hear me? Hold on. The boy nodded weakly, and Sam rode into the night with a heavy heart and a burning determination. The lonely cowman had found a purpose beyond his solitary existence, but he had no idea that his discovery would unleash forces that would shake Tombstone to its very foundations. As he rode toward his ranch, Sam didn't notice the figure watching from the shadows, someone who had heard every word and was already planning to ensure that Samuel Mitchell's newfound conscience wouldn't upset the delicate balance of power in Tombstone. The game had begun, and the stakes were higher than anyone imagined. 3 days had passed since Sam's discovery at the blacksmith shop, and he hadn't slept more than a few hours total. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Timothy's face, those hollow, desperate eyes pleading for help. Sam had spent those days riding the boundaries of his ranch, thinking, planning, and wrestling with his conscience. On the 4th morning, he made his decision. Loading his saddlebags with supplies, Sam rode back into Tombstone with grim determination. His first stop was the sheriff's office, where he found Sheriff William Bill Crawford cleaning his rifle. Crawford was a lean man in his 50s, with graying hair and a mustache that had seen better days. He'd been sheriff for nearly a decade, and Sam had always respected him as fair but practical. Morning, Bill, Sam said, removing his hat as he entered. Sam Mitchell. Don't see you in town much these days. What brings you in? Sam took a deep breath. Got a situation needs addressing. Marcus Blackwood's got a boy chained up in his shop. Child's being starved, mistreated. It ain't right. Crawford set down his rifle and studied Sam's face. That's a serious accusation, Sam. You sure about what you saw? Saw it with my own eyes. Boy's name is Timothy Walsh, maybe 10 years old. Marcus claims he bought him from some drifter for $1. The sheriff's expression grew troubled. Bought him? That's what he said. Boy's chained to the wall, Bill. Hasn't eaten in days. It's barbaric. Crawford stood and walked to the window, looking out at the street. Sam, I'm going to be straight with you. There's been arrangements like this before, usually with adults, sometimes with older children. It's not exactly legal, but it's not exactly illegal either, especially if there's no family to claim them. Sam felt his heart sink. You're saying you won't do anything? I'm saying it's complicated. If Marcus has some kind of documentation, if the boy truly has no family, he's a child, Bill. Documentation or not, no human being should be treated like property. Crawford turned back to face him. I hear you, Sam. I do. But I've got to work within the law, and the law's got gray areas when it comes to orphans and such. Sam's jaw tightened. Then I'll handle it myself. Now hold on, Crawford said quickly. Don't go doing anything stupid. If you really want to help this boy, there might be another way. I'm listening. Talk to Marcus. See if he'll sell the boy to you. Make it a business transaction. That way, nobody gets hurt, and the boy gets a better situation. Sam considered this. It galled him to treat Timothy like merchandise. But if it was the only way, and if Marcus refuses, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But Sam, be careful. Marcus has friends in this town, powerful ones. Don't make enemies you can't handle. An hour later, Sam stood outside the blacksmith shop, steeling himself for what was to come. He could hear the rhythmic pounding of hammer on anvil, and underneath it, the soft sound of someone working the bellows. "Marcus!" Sam called out as he entered. The blacksmith looked up from his work, his face darkening when he saw Sam. "Thought I told you to mind your own business, Mitchell." "I'm here to make you an offer," Sam said, his voice steady. "I want to buy the boy." Marcus set down his hammer, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Is that so? Well, well. The lonely cowman's got himself a soft spot." Sam ignored the taunt. "Name your price." "Oh, it ain't that simple anymore, Mitchell. See, since you were here last, I've been thinking. That boy's got potential. He's learning the trade, getting stronger. In a few years, he'll be worth his weight in gold. He's a child, not an investment. Everything's an investment if you look at it right." Marcus walked over to where Timothy was working the bellows. The boy looked even thinner than before, if that was possible. "Boy, tell Mr. Mitchell here how much you've learned." Timothy looked up with fearful eyes. I can work the bellows good now, sir, and I'm learning to sort the iron." Sam's heart broke at the boy's attempt to please his captor. "Timothy, you remember me?" The boy nodded eagerly. "Yes, sir. You said to hold on." "That's right, son. I did." Sam turned back to Marcus. "How much?" Marcus pretended to consider. "Well, I paid $1 for him, but that was when he was just dead weight. Now he's trained, useful. I'd say $50. Sam's eyes widened. $50 was a fortune, more than most men made in 3 months. "That's highway robbery. That's business. Take it or leave it." Sam's mind raced. He had maybe $20 to his name, and his only valuable asset was his prize bull, Goliath. The animal was worth at least $60, maybe more at auction. "I need time to raise the money," Sam said. "Time's a luxury, Mitchell. Every day that boy gets more valuable to me. You've got 1 week. After that, the price goes up." As Sam turned to leave, Timothy called out softly, "Mister, you really gonna help me?" Sam knelt down beside the boy, ignoring Marcus's glowering presence. "I promise you, Timothy, I'm going to get you out of here. My mama used to say promises were like prayers," Timothy whispered. "They only work if you really believe. Then you better start believing, son." That evening, Sam sat in the Tombstone Saloon, nursing a whiskey and wrestling with his decision. Selling Goliath would leave him financially crippled, but what choice did he have? "You look like a man with troubles," came a voice from behind him. Sam turned to see Dr. Elizabeth Harper, one of the few female doctors in the territory. She was in her 30s with intelligent eyes and a reputation for speaking her mind. "Doc Harper, didn't expect to see you in here. Sometimes a woman needs a drink just like anyone else." She sat down across from him. "I heard about your visit to the sheriff's office today. Word travels fast in a small town." Sam studied her face. And I think what you're trying to do is admirable. That boy deserves better." "You know about Timothy?" Elizabeth nodded grimly. "I've treated him twice. Once for malnutrition, once for a broken rib. Marcus claimed he fell, but you didn't believe him. Broken ribs don't happen from falling, not the way his was broken. Someone hit him, hard." Sam's hands clenched into fists. "Why didn't you report it?" "To who?" "The sheriff. Marcus has friends, Sam. Important friends. People who benefit from the current arrangements." "What kind of friends?" Elizabeth glanced around nervously. "The kind who own half the businesses in town. The kind who make sure certain activities go unnoticed. Marcus isn't just a blacksmith, Sam. He's part of something bigger." Before Sam could ask more questions, the saloon doors swung open, and Marcus Blackwood walked in with 2 other men Sam didn't recognize. They were well-dressed, clearly not laborers. "Speak of the devil," Elizabeth murmured. "The tall one is Jonathan Crane, owns the biggest mine outside town. The other is Robert Hayes, runs the freight company. Both of them have business relationships with Marcus." Sam watched as the 3 men took a table in the corner, their voices low but their eyes occasionally drifting toward him. "They know why you're here," Elizabeth said quietly, "and they're not happy about it. Let them be unhappy. I'm not backing down. Sam, You don't understand. These men have power, influence. They can make your life very difficult. More difficult than watching a child suffer? Elizabeth smiled sadly. You're a good man, Sam Mitchell. But good men don't always win in places like Tombstone. As if to prove her point, Marcus stood up and walked over to their table. Mitchell, enjoying your evening? It was peaceful until now. Marcus chuckled. Funny thing about peace. It's fragile, easy to break. He leaned closer. My friends over there, they're curious about your sudden interest in my business affairs. Tell your friends I don't care about their curiosity. Oh, but you should. See, they've got investments to protect, reputations to maintain. They don't take kindly to troublemakers. Sam stood up slowly. Is that a threat, Marcus? It's friendly advice, the kind a smart man takes. The saloon had grown quiet, other patrons sensing the tension. Sam looked Marcus in the eye. I'll have your money by week's end. See that you do. And Mitchell, make sure it's just the money you bring. No sheriffs, no federal marshals, no bleeding hearts. Just you, the money, and a willingness to forget what you've seen. As Marcus walked away, Elizabeth grabbed Sam's arm. He's serious, Sam. These people don't make idle threats. Sam finished his whiskey and stood up. Neither do I, Doc. Neither do I. Outside, the desert wind carried the scent of sage and the promise of a storm. Sam looked up at the stars, thinking of Timothy chained in that dark shop, and made a silent vow. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, he would keep his promise to that boy. But as he walked toward his horse, Sam didn't see the figure following him in the shadows, or notice the glint of metal in the moonlight. The game was escalating, and not everyone wanted the lonely cowman to succeed. The morning of the cattle auction dawned gray and ominous, with storm clouds gathering over the Dragoon Mountains. Sam stood in the corral with Goliath, his prize bull, running his hands along the animal's massive flanks. The bull had been with him for 5 years, a symbol of his success and independence. Now, he was about to sacrifice it all for a boy he barely knew. You sure about this, Sam? Asked Jake Morrison, his only neighbor and closest friend. Jake was a weathered man in his 50s who ran a smaller spread adjacent to Sam's ranch. That bull's your future. Without him, your herd won't grow. Sam continued stroking Goliath's neck. Some things matter more than the future, Jake. That boy's got no future at all if I don't act. But $50? That's robbery, plain and simple. Maybe so, but it's the only way. Jake shook his head. There's something you should know, Sam. I was in town yesterday, heard talk. Marcus ain't the only one involved in this business. Word is there's a whole network. People bringing in orphans, runaways, even some adults who got no choice. Sam's blood ran cold. How many people know about this? More than you'd think, and most of them profit from it somehow. You're not just fighting Marcus, Sam. You're fighting a system. An hour later, they loaded Goliath into a wagon and headed for Tombstone. The auction was held in the town square every month, drawing buyers from across the territory. As they approached, Sam could see a crowd had already gathered around the makeshift auction platform. Auctioneer Pete Williams was a thin man with a voice that could carry across a canyon. He'd been running auctions in Tombstone for over a decade and knew the value of every animal in the territory. Sam Mitchell, Pete called out as they approached. Heard you might have something special for us today. Goliath here, Sam said, patting the bull's flank. Best breeding stock in Arizona. Pete's eyes widened as he examined the animal. My word, Sam. This is a magnificent specimen. What's got you selling him? Personal reasons. As word spread through the crowd that Sam Mitchell was selling his prize bull, people began gathering around. Among them, Sam noticed several familiar faces, including Jonathan Crane and Robert Hayes, the men he'd seen with Marcus at the saloon. Dr. Elizabeth Harper appeared at his side. Sam, are you sure about this? Once Goliath's gone, there's no getting him back. I know what I'm doing, Doc. Do you? Because I've been asking around about our friend Marcus. The things I've learned. She lowered her voice. There are children all over this territory living in similar conditions. Timothy isn't the only one. Sam's jaw tightened. All the more reason to start somewhere. The auction began with smaller livestock, chickens, pigs, a few horses. Sam watched nervously as the bidding proceeded, noting who was buying what and how much money was changing hands. When Pete finally called for Goliath to be brought forward, a hush fell over the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," Pete announced, "we have here the finest bull I've seen in 20 years, Goliath, owned by Sam Mitchell. Bidding starts at $30. Hands shot up immediately. 35, 40, 45. Sam watched as the price climbed, his heart pounding. He needed at least $50, but the bidding was fierce. Ranchers from across the territory had come specifically for this animal. "$50, called out a voice from the back. Sam turned to see who had made the bid and was surprised to recognize Thomas Whitman, a wealthy rancher from Tucson. Whitman was known for his fair dealing and his opposition to some of the territory's more unsavory practices. "55, countered another bidder. "60, Whitman responded immediately. The bidding continued to climb. 65, 70, 75. Sam could hardly believe it. He'd expected 50 at most, but Goliath was bringing in far more than he'd dreamed. $80, came a new voice. Sam's blood turned to ice. The bidder was Jonathan Crane, one of Marcus's associates. The man was smiling coldly, his eyes fixed on Sam rather than the bull. "85, Whitman countered. $100, Crane announced, causing gasps throughout the crowd. The bidding war continued, but Sam realized what was happening. Crane wasn't interested in the bull. He was driving up the price to hurt Sam financially. If Crane won, he'd probably sell Goliath back to Marcus for a fraction of the price, or worse, slaughter the animal out of spite. $120, Whitman called out, his voice strained. $150. Crane responded without hesitation. The crowd was stunned. No bull in Arizona history had ever sold for such a price. Whitman shook his head and stepped back. He couldn't compete with Crane's deep pockets. "Going once, going twice," Pete began. $200. Everyone turned in shock. The voice belonged to Dr. Elizabeth Harper. She stood with her chin raised defiantly, staring directly at Crane. "Doc," Sam whispered, "what are you doing? You don't have that kind of money." "Neither does he. Not really," she whispered back. "But I've got something he doesn't. The support of people who matter." Crane's face had turned red with anger. $250. $300, came another voice. This time it was Thomas Whitman, but he wasn't bidding for himself. Behind him stood a group of ranchers and townspeople, all nodding their agreement. They were pooling their money. "What's happening?" Sam asked Jake. "Word's gotten out about what you're trying to do," Jake replied with a grin. "Folks are taking sides." Crane looked around nervously. He was wealthy, but $300 was a significant sum even for him. More importantly, he was beginning to realize that this auction had become something more than a simple cattle sale. It had become a public referendum on the practices he and his associates had been hiding. "300 going once," Pete called out. Crane opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked toward the back of the crowd where Marcus Blackwood stood watching, his face dark with fury. "Going twice." "Sold," Pete announced, "to the consortium led by Mr. Whitman for $300. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Sam stood in stunned silence as people he barely knew came forward to congratulate him. Whitman approached with a leather pouch heavy with coins. "This is your money, Sam," Whitman said. "Every penny of it. What you're doing takes courage, and courage should be rewarded." "I can't take this," Sam protested. "It's too much." "You can, and you will," Dr. Harper said firmly. "This community has been looking the other way for too long. It's time someone stood up." As the crowd began to disperse, Sam noticed Marcus pushing through the people toward him. The blacksmith's face was a mask of rage. "You think you're clever, Mitchell?" Marcus snarled. "You think this changes anything?" "It changes everything for Timothy," Sam replied calmly. "One boy, one insignificant boy. You have no idea what you're messing with." "Then why don't you enlighten me?" Marcus leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "There are people in this territory who won't stand for interference in their business. Important people. Federal people. You keep pushing and you might find yourself facing charges you never saw coming. What kind of charges? The kind that come with federal warrants. The kind that involve accusations of interfering with legitimate business operations. The kind that could see you in a federal prison for a very long time. Sam felt a chill run down his spine. You're bluffing. Am I? We'll see, won't we? Marcus turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Mitchell? The price just went up. $75 now. Inflation, you understand. As Marcus walked away, Dr. Harper moved to Sam's side. He's scared, Sam. Really scared. That's why he's making threats. Maybe. But what if he's not bluffing about the federal charges? Then we'll deal with that when it comes. Right now, you've got enough money to buy Timothy's freedom twice over. Let's go get that boy. But as they prepared to leave the auction site, none of them noticed the telegraph operator hurrying toward the Western Union office with a message that would change everything. The wire was addressed to a federal marshal in Phoenix, and it contained accusations that would bring the full weight of the U.S. government down on Samuel Mitchell. The game was about to become deadlier than anyone imagined, and the stakes were no longer just Timothy's freedom. They were Sam's life. The confrontation at Marcus Blackwood's smithy was set for noon, but Sam arrived early wanting to scout the situation. What he found made his blood run cold. The shop was surrounded by armed men, not local toughs, but professional gunmen with federal badges gleaming on their chests. Deputy U.S. Marshal Richard Stone stepped out of the shadows, a tall man with cold gray eyes and a reputation for ruthless efficiency. Samuel Mitchell, you're under arrest for interfering with federal operations and conspiracy to disrupt interstate commerce. Sam's hand moved instinctively toward his gun, but he was outnumbered 6-1. Federal operations? What are you talking about? The transportation and placement of displaced persons across territorial lines, Stone replied with bureaucratic precision. You've been interfering with a sanctioned program. Sanctioned? Sam's voice rose in disbelief. You're telling me the federal government sanctions child slavery? Stone's expression didn't change. I'm telling you that you're under arrest. Surrender your weapon. As Sam reluctantly handed over his Colt, Dr. Elizabeth Harper appeared around the corner, with Sheriff Crawford and Thomas Whitman. Behind them came a crowd of townspeople, including many who had supported Sam at the auction. What's the meaning of this? Sheriff Crawford demanded. Federal business, Sheriff, Stone replied. Stand aside. Not in my town, Crawford said firmly. I want to see your warrant. Stone produced a document from his coat. As Crawford examined it, his face grew troubled. This warrant's dated yesterday, but it references crimes supposedly committed weeks. Ego! How's that possible? Marshal Stone, Dr. Harper called out. I'm a physician. I've documented evidence of child abuse in that smithy. Are you telling me the federal government condones such treatment? For the first time, Stone looked uncomfortable. The placement program ensures orphaned children receive care and training. Care? The voice came from an unexpected source. Timothy Walsh had appeared in the doorway of the smithy, no longer chained but still bearing the marks of his ordeal. You call this care? The boy's appearance sent a murmur through the crowd. His thin frame and visible bruises told a story that no official document could contradict. Timothy, Sam called out. Are you all right, son? Mr. Mitchell, you came back, Timothy said, his voice stronger than Sam had ever heard it. Just like you promised. Marcus Blackwood emerged from the shop, his face flushed with anger. Boy, get back inside. You've got work to do. No, Timothy said quietly. I ain't going back in there. The simple defiance of a 10-year-old boy created a moment of profound silence. Then Timothy continued, his young voice carrying across the square. My name is Timothy Walsh, and I got something to say. Mr. Mitchell here. He's the first person who ever treated me like I was worth something. But there's things y'all don't know. Things I've been too scared to tell. Marshal Stone stepped forward. Boy, you need to let him speak, Thomas Whitman interrupted. The child has a right to be heard. Timothy looked around at the gathered crowd, then fixed his eyes on Sam. Mr. Mitchell, you remember I told you my mama died of fever up in Phoenix? I remember, son. Well, that was true. But what I didn't tell you was who my daddy was. Timothy's voice grew stronger. My mama, she worked at the Grand Hotel in Phoenix, and sometimes important men would visit. Federal men. Marshal Stone's face had gone pale. Boy, you don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying, Timothy replied with startling maturity. My daddy was Marshal James Walsh. He was Marshal Stone's partner. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Stone looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Timothy continued. After my mama died, Marshal Walsh was supposed to take care of me, but he had a wife, a family. Didn't want a bastard son messing up his reputation, so he arranged for me to disappear. That's impossible, Stone stammered. James would never. He paid that drifter to bring me here, Timothy said, his voice now carrying the weight of terrible truth. Told him to find someone who'd take me off his hands permanent-like. Marcus here. He was part of a whole system. Federal marshals, territorial officials, businessmen, they all knew about it. Dr. Harper stepped forward. Timothy, are you saying this child trafficking operation has federal backing? Not official backing, Timothy replied, but they knew about it. Used it. Whenever they had problems they needed to make disappear, orphans, witnesses, people who knew too much, they'd arrange for them to vanish into the system. Sam felt the pieces clicking into place. That's why Marcus was so confident he had federal protection. Had, Timothy emphasized. But things changed when you started asking questions, Mr. Mitchell. Suddenly people were paying attention. The system only works when nobody cares enough to look. Marshal Stone drew his gun. That's enough! Boy, you're coming with me! This whole situation is getting out of hand. I don't think so, came a new voice. Everyone turned to see a woman in her 30s approaching on horseback. She wore a badge and carried herself with unmistakable authority. Deputy U.S. Marshal Catherine Reynolds, she announced, dismounting. Marshal Stone, you're relieved of duty pending investigation. Stone's gun wavered. Catherine, what are you doing here? Following up on some very disturbing reports. Reports about federal marshals involved in human trafficking. She looked at Timothy with gentle eyes. Son, are you Timothy Walsh? Yes, ma'am. Your father sent me. He's been looking for you for months. The crowd gasped. Timothy's eyes filled with tears. My daddy? But you thought he abandoned you. That's what someone wanted you to think. Marshal Walsh has been investigating this trafficking ring for over a year. When you disappeared, he knew something was wrong. Stone's face had gone from pale to ashen. Catherine, you don't understand. The boy's confused, traumatized. The boy's telling the truth, Reynolds said firmly. We have evidence, Stone. Documents, witness statements, financial records. This whole operation is about to come crashing down. Marcus Blackwood suddenly bolted for his shop, but Thomas Whitman and several other men blocked his path. Going somewhere, Marcus? This is all lies, Marcus shouted. That boy's been nothing but trouble. Since he got here. The only trouble, Sam said, stepping forward, is that he survived long enough to tell the truth. Marshal Reynolds addressed the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed here today is the exposure of a criminal conspiracy that reaches into the highest levels of territorial government. Timothy Walsh is not the only victim. We've identified at least 30 other children who've been trafficked through this network over the past 5 years. The crowd's murmur turned to angry shouts. Sheriff Crawford stepped forward. Marshal Reynolds, what do you need from us? Justice, she replied simply. And witnesses. Lots of witnesses. As the federal marshals took Stone and Marcus into custody, Timothy walked over to Sam. Mr. Mitchell, I got something for you. The boy reached into his pocket and pulled out a small carved wooden horse. I made this while I was chained up. Help me remember that there was still good in the world. I want you to have it. Sam knelt down and accepted the gift, his eyes moist. Timothy, this is the finest thing anyone's ever given me. You saved my life, Mr. Mitchell. You and all these people. You showed me that sometimes, when things seem darkest, good folks will stand up and do what's right. Dr. Harper approached with tears in her eyes. Timothy, your father's on his way here. He should arrive tomorrow. Will he want me? Really want me? Son, Sam said, putting his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Any man would be proud to call you his son. You've got more courage than most grown men I know." As the sun set over Tombstone, the crowd began to disperse. But the impact of the day's events would resonate for years to come. The trafficking network was dismantled, dozens of children were reunited with families or placed in legitimate care, and the territory's laws were strengthened to prevent such abuses in the future. Sam stood with Timothy, watching the stars appear in the desert sky. "You know, son, I came to town thinking I was going to rescue you. Turns out, you rescued all of us." "How's that, Mr. Mitchell?" "You reminded us what we're supposed to be fighting for. Not just our own interests, but for what's right. For people who can't fight for themselves." Timothy smiled, the first genuine smile Sam had ever seen from him. "My mama used to say that heroes ain't the folks who ain't scared. Heroes are the folks who are scared but do the right thing anyway. Your mama was a wise woman." "Yes, sir. And Mr. Mitchell, thank you for keeping your promise." As they walked toward the hotel where Timothy would spend his last night in Tombstone before reuniting with his father, Sam reflected on how much had changed. He'd lost his prize bull but gained something far more valuable, the knowledge that one person's courage could indeed change the world. The lonely cowman was lonely no more. He'd found his purpose, his community, and his faith in humanity restored. And in a small hotel room, a 10-year-old boy slept peacefully for the first time in months, knowing that tomorrow would bring him home. The truth had indeed shaken Tombstone, but from that shaking had come something stronger, something better. And in the years to come, whenever people spoke of the day the trafficking ring was exposed, they would remember not just the corruption that was revealed, but the courage of ordinary people who refused to look the other way. Justice had prevailed, hope had been restored, and the promise of a better tomorrow shone as bright as the Arizona stars. Hello, how are you? Did you enjoy the story? Like, share, comment on which city you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel to help us continue adding new amazing videos. Thank you very much, and come back often.